The internet is an incredible thing. You can find information about any subject you want. But if you look hard enough, you can find a more sinister part of it. Online you can find creepypastas, which are legends or myths or creepy creatures which people describe in their own words. In this video of Mysteriously Strange, we are going to take a look at the top 5 of the more scary creepypastas out there. Number 5. Polybius. A majority of the population played some sort of video game in their lives. There's a big group of people who grew up playing video games. However, there's a creepypasta, which can make life a living nightmare if you are a fan of old school video games. The story goes that in 1980s there was an arcade game named Polybius. This arcade game was no ordinary game. The creepypasta describes the game as a government project. Polybius was said to be a psychology experiment which was conducted from Portland. The game was developed in such a way that it would engage the parts of the brain which would make the game highly addictive. Other people who played the game complained about headaches and hallucinations after having played Polybius. And that was not the only scary thing. Once in a while a secret agent Men in Black type would come up and open up the machine to check their data. This data could have been used for many things. They could use it for mind control, population control, and even propaganda. However you look at it, it seems that the legend of Polybius seems to have influences from the MK project. MK was a mind control program which was conducted by the CIA, authorized by the United States government, and consisted of doing experiments on human subjects. They developed drugs to weaken a suspect before an interrogation, so it has not been a secret that the government conducts experiments on the population without them knowing it themselves. So what do you think? Is Polybius real, and was it a government-funded project to hypnotize the population and to design some sort of mind control? One thing is for sure, it is incredibly creepy to think about. Number 4. The Expressionless. The Expressionless is a terrifying creepypasta about a woman with a face which is without expression. In June 1972, an unidentified woman walked into the Cedars-Sinai hospital. As she walked up to the check-in counter, the nurse behind the counter noticed that the woman was wearing a bloodied white gown. Seeing someone walking with blood on their clothing was nothing new for the staff that worked the emergency room at the hospital. They had patients walking in all the time. However, there was something different about this woman. Her face had not the typical features. There were no eyebrows, 2 white eyes, and her face had an unnatural white color, as if she was wearing too much makeup. Right before the nurse checked her in, she pulled a kitten out of her mouth and she collapsed on the floor. The unidentified woman is rushed into one of the rooms and restrained to her bed for safety reasons. The hospital staff did not know if the blood on the gown was hers or someone else's. Nobody of the staff dared to even look at the woman in the eye because of the blank expression on her face. At some point they had to inject her with a sedative, but as soon as they tried it, the nameless woman started fighting back. She looks at the doctor, rose up from her bed and bit him in the side of the neck, killing him. As the doctor lay dying, the nameless woman looked him closely in the eye and whispered, "I am God." The woman killed everyone in the room but left one survivor, and that survivor shared her story. She named the woman as the Expressionless. The unidentified woman was never seen again. She could be anywhere. Who knows? Number 3. Candle Cove. One of the most interesting creepypastas out there has to be Candle Cove. This creepypasta is about a television series which went by the same name. It was not available to everyone, mainly children who would watch the program. However, they would not remember the show until they grew up. when the horrific scenes and imagery would reappear in their memories. On an internet forum, these traumatized individuals would write about their experiences with the show. The show featured a variety of terrifying puppets who would go on an adventure where they would meet pirates and other interesting characters. One of the pirates is a skeleton named the Skin Taker, and he wears clothing which is entirely made out of children's skin. In one particularly traumatizing episode of the show, all the other puppets are screaming and terrorizing Janice, who was the main protagonist of the series, and she is just crying in a corner. There are no records anywhere that the show even existed. Nobody remembers exactly what the different episodes were, and if people saw the show, they would only have fake memories of it. One viewer remembered the show and asked his mother if she remembered any of the episodes. However, his mother responded that whenever the viewer would watch Candle Cove, there was nothing but static on the screen. The story of Candle Cove became so popular that the Sci-Fi Channel made a series out of it named Channel Zero. Do you believe in the story of Candle Cove? Do you remember any shows from your childhood that were traumatizing for you when growing up? Leave them down in the comments. Number 2. Slender Man. Everybody has heard about Slender Man, which is a character which originated on the internet. The stories about Slender Man are about him stalking, abducting and traumatizing people, but he specialized in children. It all started with pictures on the internet which depicted the playground with happy children with the menacing figure of Slender Man hiding in the background. It soon became apparent that there were more people that had interacted with or seen Slender Man. He is described as a tall humanoid figure with featureless white face and has the capability of having tentacles coming from his back. Slender Man was mainly seen in forest areas or other abandoned areas, and he has the skill to teleport to stalk his victims more efficiently. Unfortunate people who would run into Slender Man or were stalked by Slender Man recall that they would feel sick, feel paranoid, had nightmares or hallucinations. Another mysterious power of Slender Man would be that he could interfere with audio and video recordings to mess with the head of the victims. This can be seen in the games based around the legend of Slender Man, Slender the 8 Pages and Slender the Arrival. Through symbolism, Slender Man would intimidate its victims and terrorize them before abducting them and feeding on their energy. As Slender Man grew in pop culture, a movie was made around him, where he would possess the victim and they would act out horrible crimes in name of Slender Man. This movie is loosely based on the sad real event where a young girl attacked another girl with a knife. Sadly, the victim did not survive. The suspect stated that she acted upon commands that Slender Man had given her. Even though that last story is incredibly sad and we feel a great deal of pain for the family, this shows that creepypastas, although being fiction, can have very real consequences in our everyday lives. Number 1. The Russian Sleep Experiment. The final creepypasta that we'll discuss today is probably the most terrifying one. Everybody loves sleep. It's an essential part of our routine, and it makes sure that we can tackle the tasks ahead well rested and without being cranky. However, imagine what would happen if you would stay awake for a longer period of time, 30 days to be exact. The story goes that a group of convicted criminals was selected for an experiment through which the prisoners could earn their freedom. They did not know, however, that this was a false promise. The group of criminals would be sealed in a chamber, which would be filled with a gas that would keep them awake for as long as possible. However, none of the researchers working on the project thought that the experiment would take such a horrifying turn. The first couple of days were no problem, but after 9 days the first prisoner started screaming uncontrollably for hours while the others in the chamber had no reaction at all. In the following days more prisoners started screaming and they tore the available books apart and used their feces to stick the pages to the cameras and the windows blocking them. After a few days of barely any contact with the subjects, the researchers decided to open the chamber after 15 days. When they opened the chamber, they were witness to a horrific sight. Surviving subjects were practicing self-harm, tore off their own skin and were eating human meat of the subjects that passed away during this experiment. However, the management team behind the researchers did not want the experiment to be stopped, and they decided that the researchers themselves would take the place of the dying prisoners. Unacceptable for the researchers, they took action in their own hands, killing the management and put the other remaining prisoners out of their misery as they pleaded for their death. This is a horrifying story, and thankfully it's just a creepypasta, but who knows what kind of secret experiments governments are conducting on unwilling subjects. One thing is for sure, it's incredibly scary to think about. Let me know what the next video should be about. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, that will be highly appreciated. And if you have a spare minute, why not consider subscribing so that you will not miss the next Mysteriously Strange.